Closing the lid of the wooden box which contained the 5 radiant pills, Elder Kayla looked up at General Arthur and asked, "How is Princess Soph recently?" "She cultivates each day, and it seems like she has gained some progress," General Arthur answered. Elder Kayla considered for a moment and replied, "Well, I should give her some instructions on cultivation. However, she is cultivating the technique of the human cultivators. I'm not familiar with such techniques. In the Dragon Palace, all our cultivation techniques are Dragon Tribe techniques, right? The Sword Shadow Scroll seems to be a human cultivation technique, but I'm afraid Princess Soph doesn't have the patience to cultivate it. None of the other cultivation techniques in our Dragon Palace will fit her." Suddenly, General Arthur changed the subject. "Third Lord has taken the Sword Shadow Scroll to restart his cultivation, since his damaged Dragon Core can take the opportunity to cultivate the 5 elemental essences simultaneously to build a solid foundation." "Why did you bring him up suddenly?" Elder Kayla glanced at General Arthur. A smile appeared on General Arthur's withered face. "Third Lord hasn't sent back any messages after being out for so long. I miss him quite a lot." Wringing her hands, Elder Kayla sighed lightly and said in a low voice, "He's a lucky man. He will be fine." "I hope so. I'm sorry to disturb your cultivation. I'd better go now." General Arthur stood up and walked out of the living room. Elder Kayla sat in the armchair, deep in thought. Then she exhaled deeply and touched the warm wooden box containing the godly elixir pills before walking out of the door. Above the Dragon Palace, the blue waves were surging. She looked up at the layers of blue waves and was a bit emotional. After a little pause, she crossed the small garden and walked towards Susan's room. "My disciple is lucky. She's cold, but someone still cares for her. Then there's that man out there, pursuing the heavenly dragon realm. Doesn't send any messages back, even though it has already been more than half a month. Everyone says that I like to cultivate, but in fact, I'm on a hard journey pursuing that magnificent figure before me," she thought. In her fluttering robe, Elder Kayla shook her head slightly and gently pushed open the door to Susan's room. On the other side, Jacob and Snowflake rushed out of the ocean and flew directly to Fifth Heaven. He told Sam and his other 2 roommates that he had things to do at home recently and had to go home every day. Since they were now used to him not living in the dorm, they didn't ask him too many questions. In order to elevate to the 4th level, and even charge at the 5th level as soon as possible, he had to spend most of his time in Fifth Heaven. Snowflake shot towards the valley and drew out a line of white light. Meanwhile, the 3 elders who had been waiting for him for a whole day all flew into the air at his appearance. However, before they could get close, Jacob had already rushed into the array formation in the valley. After all, Snowflake was too fast for them. Stopping at the entrance of the valley, they exchanged a look, wondering if this senior didn't want to talk to them or didn't notice them at all. "How about sending a voice transmission note into the valley?" Elder Emily asked Elder Hans carefully. "His speed is the traveling speed of an Ascent Soul Realm cultivator, right?" Elder Hans asked them hesitantly. In Fifth Heaven, the Ascent Soul Realm cultivators were at the top of the pyramid. Even though these 3 elders had never seen one, they were sure that the speed they just witnessed didn't belong to a core formation realm cultivator. The 3 elders were all top-tier core formation realm cultivators, and none of them could reach such a fast-traveling speed. The senior seemed to be traveling on a mount instead of on a flying sword, Elder Tate said after a moment of hesitation. "Are you sure?" Elder Hans asked immediately. The 3 sects had been rivals over the ownership of the Herb King Valley, but now they were allies, depending on each other. "I was the closest to the senior and thus had the clearest view. His mount is a white lion," Elder Tate nodded gravely and said. White lion? Elder Hans thought for a moment and said, "Is it possible that he's a cultivator from the Sky Mountain sect on Sixth Heaven?" "I'm not sure if he's an Ascent Soul Realm cultivator, but if Elder Tate is right about the mount, the Snow Lion should be a spirit beast above level 4, right?" Elder Emily looked at the other two elders and asked cautiously. Elder Hans and Elder Tate exchanged a look. Neither of them could answer the question. All they knew was that the Sky Mountain sect from Sixth Heaven raised a lot of snow lions, and some high-level disciples had them as their mounts. As to what level this spirit beast was on, they had no clue. After all, the sects on Fifth Heaven had rarely seen spirit beasts. However, they were sure that a spirit beast with such great speed couldn't be at a low level 1. Since the power of a level 1 spirit beast was equivalent to that of a core formation realm cultivator, they estimated that this snow line should be close to level 4. Anyway, with such a spirit beast as his mount, the senior must have a high ranking in his sect, Elder Tate said. Since snow lions were the symbolic spirit beasts of the Sky Mountain sect, they all considered Jacob as one of the elite disciples of the sect. It must be noted that the small sects on Fifth Heaven all looked up to the sects on Sixth Heaven with respect, especially the Sky Mountain sect, which stood out from the other sects on Sixth Heaven, since it had connections with some sects on Seventh Heaven due to their skills in raising spirit beasts and growing herbs. There were less than 20 sects on Sixth Heaven, and Sky Mountain sect was one of the few that were well known on Fifth and Seventh Heaven. At this thought, the three masters began to look hopeful. It is one thing if this senior is only a hermit collector. However, he's obviously a high-ranking disciple of the Sky Mountain sect, coming to Fifth Heaven to do business by himself. If we could befriend him, they thought. I think we'd better pay a visit to this senior. After all, while he's temporarily living in our Herb King Valley, we must show him our hospitality as the local host, Elder Emily said as she pulled a streak of hair behind her ear. Compared with their determination to take back the Herb King Valley by force yesterday, their attitude had now taken a 100-degree turn. Elder Emily's right. I think we'd better return to our respective sects and prepare some gifts before paying a visit to this senior, Elder Hans agreed immediately. After some consideration, Elder Tate thought that the return of dozens of flying swords was now a minor issue. If this senior disciple of the Sky Mountain sect agreed to take his sect as a resting place on Fifth Heaven in the future, it would bring great benefits to his sect. After their discussion, the three elders flew in 3 directions. They each had their own thoughts, but they were afraid to act alone. By working together, they could face any potential problems together. Jacob didn't know that there were 3 sects on 3 sides of the valley, nor did he know that the cave he built casually gave 3 elders 2 consecutive sleepless nights. He walked into his cave cheerfully and checked to make sure that no one had intruded into the cave before settling down to cultivate. Thanks to the array formation Noah gave him, the essence in the valley seemed to have grown even more intense. The Big Dipper constellation array not only prevented cultivators from breaking into the valley, but it could stop the essence from leaking out as well. Under the protection of the array formation, this valley wouldn't be seen by the passing cultivators, and it would be regarded as an ordinary valley that was filled by an area of intense white fog. The array formation prevented the probing eyes of the 3 surrounding sects, but it also blocked Jade and Julia from the valley. Sister, the array formation is annoying. Now we don't know what Master is doing in the valley, Julia complained after flying around and finding no loopholes in the array formation. This array formation is fragile, but Master built it. We shouldn't break it. Jade confronted Julia helplessly. She was more impatient than Julia, but the latter seemed to be more eager to check on Jacob. What should we do? Julia looked at Jade. We will go back. After all, the cultivators in the core formation realm can't break this array formation. And Master built it to keep his privacy, Jade said with a smile. Okay, Julia agreed reluctantly. During their patrol over the last 2 days and nights, they sensed that Jacob was trying his best to absorb the essence in the valley. And he made significant progress. While they were happy to see his progress, they were worried that he might encounter dangers. Cultivating in seclusion was a fast way to elevate realms, but the cultivators would receive great harm if they were attacked during seclusion. I'll kill anyone who dares to hurt Master. Flying with Jade toward the boundary between 5th and 4th heaven, Julia mumbled. Shaking her head with a smile, Jade took Julia's hand before shooting down from 5th heaven.